Today, like I said, a linear inequality. You're like, okay, so what does that mean in like English? It means we're going to draw lines with a little bit of a twist. And then we're going to do a little bit of coloring. We're going to do a little bit of shading as well. But we're going to have all the things that you need to make sure that you know how and when to do things. So, up here at the top, we got 4 sections. And I'm actually going to split them off here. Okay? And these little titles, you're like, okay, what's this mean? Solid line, dashed line. Okay, what's up with that? What's up with that is, if you have greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, okay, you're going to, when we graph the line, you're going to have a regular old solid line, okay? But the arrow is going to tell us what type of line we have. If it's just less than or greater than, we're going to have a dotted or a dashed line to let whoever's looking at our picture know, ooh, don't count the numbers on the line, just right up close to them. So the arrow will tell us what type of line. That's the first part. Once we have our line made, we're going to be shading it. We're going to be coloring it. So here's how this is going to work. If y is greater than, or y is greater than or equal to. So if the arrow is eating y, we're going to shade above the line. So like if I have a line here, I would shade above it, just like we have right here. However, if the arrow is pointing at y, you are less than me, we are going to shade below. So every problem we do, there's going to be 3 things we got to do. We're going to have to graph the line. We got to be able to do that, either with the calculator or with slope-intercept form. Then we're going to have to figure out, before we make the line, am I going to make it solid or dashed or dotted? And then once I got that done, we're going to do a little bit of shading. Now, it seems like a lot of stuff we got to keep track of, but once you do a couple, I think you're going to find out it's really not going to be that bad. So, step 1, determine if the line is solid or dashed. Okay, y is greater than. There's my arrow. Is my line going to be solid or dashed? Well, that was like the Philly fake out. He's like, I'm telling you both. Yeah. Okay. No line underneath. Okay, so here we know it's going to be dashed. If I'm comfortable graphing in slope-intercept form. Okay? We're going to try this first one this way, but I'm also going to show you how to do it on the calculator. So my first job, if I'm graphing on my own, okay, not using the calculator, is to graph my y-intercept, which in this case is at 4. Here's my y-axis. I go to 4. I put a dot. Okay? When we're doing these, that's always what I'm going to do first. There's going to be somewhere on this axis I'm putting a dot. So that's step 1. Step 2, we are going to go slope. So reminder on slope. Slope is rise over run. In other words, hey, am I going up or am I going down? I do that first, and then run, I'm figuring out if I'm going right or left. So part of what I do when I'm doing slope is, since you notice there's a top and a bottom like there is on a fraction, I want to make sure that my slope in my brain or on the paper is a fraction to make sure I get both parts of that. So, right off the bat here in our first example, my slope, my number in front of x, is not a fraction. So, here's the question. If your slope isn't a fraction, how do you make it one? Okay, so here, if you don't have a fraction, we're going to put it over 1. We're going to divide by 1. So when I go to make my slope now, that 2 is positive. So I'm going to go up 2. And my run is positive. So I'm going to go right. Do I need to write all this every single time I'm doing one of my own problems? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. So I'm going to start at that point that I already made. I'm going to go up 2. And I'm going to go right 1. And I'm going to keep doing it until I run out of room. I'm going to go up 2 and right 1. Up 2 and right 1. You're like, okay, Hardy, I got 4 dots. I'm good. Not exactly, though. Here's what we're going to do on these. Because being accurate is going to be so important, I want to get as many dots for this line as I can. So what we can do, yeah, if I run out of room, but there's still more graph to work with, I can do the opposite of both of these. So I can start back here, and I can go 2 down and 1 left, and keep doing that, 2 down and 1 left. And check it out, they're all lining up exactly right. And you're like, okay, Hardy, this seems like a bit of overkill. Why do I need to put all those dots? You're about to find out. So here, I basically have a line of dots. So, we know it's a dashed line. So we're not going to connect all the dots. We're just going to connect some. So anybody that looks can tell that it's dashed or dotted. So check there. And then my last job is to shade above or below the line. So I look up here and I'm like, hey, y is greater than. When y is greater than, we shade above the line. You're like, okay. So let's say sometime I'm not sure, like, what does above mean?
Top left.
So yeah, look for where, when you're on the y-axis, wherever the highest y value or wherever that up arrow is, that's the side that we're shading in, above the line. That's the easiest way I think I've seen to remember it. As long as I can tell where you're I mean, you don't have to like color it so deeply that I can't even see the crisscrosses, but I do want to be able to tell where you're shading. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, the only twist that can be thrown in, and there's only one, is what if it's not in just y by itself at the beginning? That's right. So, our first job here, that's true. So make sure.
Wait, how do you do 2x letter?
We're getting there. Okay? We're going to make sure that y is alone. So whatever we would normally do like in an equation, to get y by itself, we're going to do. So here, I'm multiplying y by 3. What's the opposite? What's the opposite of multiplying by 3? Divide. So we're going to divide every single one of these by 3. So the 3's cancel. And you're like, well, wait a minute. 2 and 3. 3 doesn't go into 2. Then leave it as a fraction. But 6 divided by 3, I can do that part. That's 2. So here's the equation that I'm actually going to graph. So I'd said before that I will show you how to do this on the calculator. I will. I'm going to do it with slope-intercept form first, but I will show you how to do it on the calculator if you're not sure or would like a little help. So once I'm in y by itself, my y-intercept, you've got to take the sign with it, is at -2. Again, that first dot going to be on the y-axis, so we got that set. Then, my slope is a fraction this time. It's the number in front of x.
Okay.
So here, I'm going to go up 2 and write 3. Again, starting at your first dot. Don't go back to the beginning. So up 2, write 3. Up 2, write 3. Up 2, write 3. That gives me a pretty good chunk of dots. But again, if I want to be able to dot all the way through, just do opposites. The opposite of up is down. The opposite of right is left. So down 2, left 3, 2, left 3. We didn't discuss this as question number 1, so we'll do it now. Is my line going to be solid or dashed? Solid. Because it's or equal to. So we'll get that in there. And this time, since y is less than or equal to, okay, when the arrow points at y, we're going to shade on the bottom half or below in my graph. You're like, Hardy, you still haven't shown us how to do it in the calculator. You said you would. Okay, it's true. So let me get... So if you wanted to go calculator mode, because you're like, me and graphing lines do not get along great. Here's all we're going to do. We're going to go to y equals. We're going to type in what's on this side. If you have a fraction, you need to put the fraction in parentheses. If you don't, you're going to get a really weird graph. The X button is right here next to the green alpha. And so, I mean, I can look at it, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of looks like this. Okay, but how does that help me graph it? I mean, it's just there. If I look at the table, the blue button, second and graph, check this out. I don't need all the decimal numbers, but check this. So there is 0, -2. There is 3, 0. I can keep going. There's 6, 2. There's 9, 4. And if I wanted to go the other way as well, -3, -4. -6, -6. And one more time for -9, -8. So you can get all the points off the calculator if that's something that you feel more comfortable with. So we got lots of good things for you here. But again, first thing of all is going to be to make sure that you've got the notes, that you use them. And if at some point you misplace them or you miss a day, that you actually remember that this is all on Classroom for you all the time. So if page 3 in your practice does not look like this, I do have extra packets in the back, so even if you find it later, you can put them together. But I would grab an extra packet from the back table and kind of roll that way. So what we're going to be doing here, okay, we're going to be graphing the inequalities. So let's see. Let me pick one that looks like it's going to be interesting. Oh, I see 2 that look interesting. Okay, we're going to do 3, and we're going to discuss 5. We may chat a little bit about 6. We'll see. So I look, and I'm like, okay, it's in y equals already. That's good. At least for the ones that I do with you, I'm going to label all the pieces. So, first question, here's my arrow. Is this going to be dotted or solid for my line?
Solid.
It's going to be solid because it's or equal to. Okay. So I got that. Check. Next part. My y-intercept is the number that does not have x. It's hanging out by itself on the end. So again, that first point is always going to be on the y-axis. So I get that point in there. Now here's the part why I chose this one, where this gets a little interesting. You look at the number in front of x and it's negative 3/2. You're like, okay, so the negative. Does the negative go with the 3? Does the negative go with the 2? Or does the negative go with both? And here's the answer. It's one of the first 2 choices. It does not go on both. So you can either put the negative on the 3 or the 2. It doesn't matter. So I normally, when I have the choice, I put the negative on the top number. That's just me. So if I do that, if my rise is negative, that means I'm going to go down 3. And that's a positive 2. I'm going to go right 2. So I go here, down 3, right 2. Down 3, right 2. I'm out of room, and I only got 3 dots. That's okay. So I got my dots. It's a solid line. I put that through there with my arrows on the end. And then finally, for my shading, I'll get myself some help here. The arrow is pointing at y. It is less than, which means we shade below the line. Find where that arrow is going down and shade on that side of your graph. Okay? The arrows will help you when you're trying to figure that part out if you're not sure. Okay? And so we've got that set. And so for any of these, a couple of things to mention. If you don't see a y-intercept sometime, if there's an x value, but there's no y-intercept, that's assumed to be 0, 0, not 1. But then it really gets odd. You're like, well, wait a minute. For 5 and 6, like, there's not a y and an x. It's just like one of them. What the heck is going on? But I've seen something like this before. Wait a minute. I go back in my notes, and I find on page 3, I'm like, hey, y equals 2 is just a horizontal line at that number. So does that mean y is greater than or equal to 1? Does that mean I go to 1 where y is 1, and I'm just going to make a horizontal line? It does. And it's going to be a solid horizontal line at 1. So I draw that. And you're like, okay. And since y is greater than, I go back to what we just did. Y is greater than, I'm supposed to shade above the line. Well, I can tell when it's this direction what side is above. There's my arrow. It's above. Okay? That's it. And so when you do run into the special cases like that, or you run into a special case like number 6, and you're like, ooh, wait, that's weird too. If it's x and just a number, that's a vertical line. So I go to where x is -1, okay, not y, x. We're going vertical here. My gosh, why are all my lines solid? Okay, again, solid because I got the line underneath. Now this gets a little more interesting. You're like, well, wait a minute. I thought you said when we were graphing it's above or below. Like, how am I supposed to tell above or below on x? You don't. Let's think about this for a minute. Okay? Here, when the arrow points at the variable, okay, the arrow's pointing at x, that's less than. Less than, if we're talking about x, the numbers are getting smaller or less than this way. Follow the arrow. The arrow is pointing to the left. That is where I'm going to shade if it's just x than. X than. Less than with x. That's the only time we're not doing above and below, is if it's just x by itself, then we just shade on the left or right, depending if it's getting bigger or less. But other than that, my job is going to be to work on doing that. So the first 6 basically are ready to go for you already. Well, now the first 3, because we did half of them together. But once you get past that, okay, there's one more on this page I want to do with you. I want to do number 9. Number 9 is weird. I'm not going to lie. It is. You're like, wait a minute. What's this y in a box? Y isn't by itself yet. So this is kind of like that second example that we did. So my first job is to get y by itself. So I got to undo a couple of things. I got to undo plus 4x. So I'm going to minus that to the other side. That does not make this -2x. This has x. This doesn't. They've got to stay separate. They can be in the same room on the same side, but they can't get like that close together. And since I need y alone, the opposite of multiply is to divide. -4, excuse me, divided by 2 is -2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And I make my slope a fraction. That is what I'm going to graph. And again, whether I put it on the graphing calculator in y equals, or I use slope-intercept form, we're going to do the same thing. So, one more time with our order of directions here. The y-intercept is the number hanging out on its own. So on my y-axis, I plot my 1. I'm good. And then for my slope, again, the negative only goes on one number. I'm going to put it on the top. Two down. and 1 right. 2 down, 1 right, 2 down, 1 right. Could I technically make my line at this point? Probably. I'd be okay. But if I want to keep dotting, again, keep doing opposites. The opposite of down 2 would be up 2. The opposite of right 1 would be left 1. So up 2 and left 1 gets me set. No line underneath my arrow this time. So my line is going to be dashed, so don't connect them all. And since y is greater than, let me pull this back over, y greater than, we shade above the line where the up arrow is. And we're set. So most of the time, if y is alone, I can go right and start doing my thing. But if it's not, I might have to do 1 or 2 opposites first to get where I need to be. But that's why we see these things several times, so we can kind of start to work our way through it some and see how that's going to go. You're like, all right, Hardy, what you got on the back? Oh my gosh, Hardy. Isn't it amazing how, like, the ones that tend to give us the most trouble just show up over and over again? So you're like, wait, when I get back here, couple of things to keep in mind. Because again, I want to make sure you got the tools in each section to have some success. Remember, the number in parentheses is x. So all you have to do is take that number in the parentheses, substitute it in for x, and then if you want to, just plug it in the calculator. And get your answer. So straight up substitution. A lot of you had asked me as well on the quiz. I wish you'd have asked me before, but we're going to get to see it here again. Well, what am I supposed to be doing here? This is kind of weird. Okay. So when x equals 1, okay, I'm right here, follow with your pen until you run into the graph. Okay, I'm running into the graph right here. What's the y value right here? Just follow it over and find your answer. No math have to do. It literally is just run into the graph, go run into the y-axis, and you've got your answer. So not too bad. You're like, okay. I mean, especially for those of you that were considering like doing a retake or something in this next one, this is some good stuff. Find the slope. Okay. I need to find points that go through those intersection points, okay? Those crosses like this. And there's usually going to be several of them on any particular line. Sometimes I'll be nice and put the dots there for you. You can pick any 2 dots you want, and you're going to do, you're like, Hardy, you're drilling this into the ground, rise over run, we get it. Okay. So rise, 1, 2, 3, 3, over, run. Pay attention to what direction you're going, though. I went left 1, which is negative. I'm good. I mean, I could say that's -3, because 3 divided by -1 is -3, but I'm perfectly willing to take either of those. You just got to pay attention to your directions. But then it goes, oh dear, Now find the equation of the line. Okay, let's see. Y equals mx plus b. I got to know those two numbers. So I look. Well, I know my slope now. 3 over negative 1 with the x. Slope's always the number that goes in front of x. My y-intercept, I go, there's my y-intercept. I'm at 1. I'm done. No other math. Where does my line cross the y-axis? What's my slope? One last thing to be nice, just because. I'm feeling good today. Ugh, fractions. Blech. Take the numbers in the denominator, last one. Multiply them together. 3 times 2 is 6. We're going to multiply, we're going to distribute that all the way through. And I am so hoping your side stuff is helping you greatly. I am. So here I look, I'm like, what do I do with that? Okay, this is on the bottom, so it's 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. I'm going to leave my x. Here there is no fraction. It's 6 times minus 4. 6 times negative 4.
Oh, yeah.
So if the number's on the bottom, if there's a fraction, 6 divided by 3 is 2. Here there is no fraction. We multiply. 6 times 5 is 30. And I solve my equation from there. So I'll start giving you one little heads up of a warning for when we hit the next quiz, which will be next week. Some of this review stuff that you keep seeing on these worksheets as we're going through along with our new stuff, it's going to show up on those. So you're going to want to try and complete those as you go. Work them, check answers. I show work when I put most of my answers up. But ask questions and do things. Sitting doesn't get passing grades. Okay? You've got to try and use your notes, use your examples, get some things on the paper, and I bet you're going to find some success. So try them out, answer